everyone. This is the Lemon Narrative with Sabreen podcast. I am Sabreen, your host. I am a writer and I'm interested in interviewing as many people as possible to hear about their human experiences from their narrative. Today, we're answering the question I always ask: if I'm writing a feature film about you, what would you tell me? I have with me here a friend, an amazing person. As you can see from my smile, I'm just too excited to have her here. So, Rée, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to people. Here you go.
Oh, oh, Sabreen, you're such a sweetheart. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I think the last time I spoke with you, we chatted for a couple of hours, and I still felt like I could speak to you for another couple more. So I'm glad we're doing this. So for your audience, my name is Rée. I'm a visual storyteller and an educator based
Mhm.
currently in South Korea. I was born and raised in the United States. Um, and I don't know what else to share about myself other than I am also a mom.
Right. That's a good start. um, can I ask you a question before the actual questions is, why did you make the move from US to South Korea?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, this is my third time living here. So, every time I lived here, it was like for a year or a few years, and then I would
Mm,
return. Um, so the first time I came, it was because I really wanted to learn more about my Korean culture because I had spent so much of my life at that time kind of rejecting my Korean culture because I was ashamed of it.
mm,
And then towards the end of my college, my senior year of undergrad, I was like, maybe I should do something really crazy and live in Korea and see what that's about. So that's the first time I moved here. And then the last time, so this current time, I
mm.
moved here for a variety of reasons. But at the time that we moved, someone was president of the United States who I did not want to be in the States to see as president. So,
Mm.
yeah, and so we moved here during that time.
Okay. Enough reasons. Seems like enough reasons for me. And as I'm someone who love cultures, and I've told you about this. I just discovered the South Korean. Like I know about South Korean culture, but due to friends insisting me to watch drama, and I'm a drama lover. Since I love screenwriting. I watch everything on planet. I watch things that I've never heard about the culture before. I'll be watching a movie about it, and I really love the language, the culture, everything behind it. So that's why I was interested. I was like, oh, why did she make the move? Right? Okay, we'll be talking about this more, but let's dive in to the main question. I'm writing a feature film about you. What would be the first scene, the opening scene? Um, what is in your mind for the opening scene?
So I've been thinking about this question because for several weeks, and I had like three different scenes that we could probably start with, and I was going to decide as soon as you asked me to see which one filled my
I want to
mind.
hear them three. I want to
All
hear the
three of
three.
them.
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, so the first one that I thought of was the moment during my second grade year when my teachers called my mother and me in for a parent teacher conference.
Hmm.
And it didn't actually happen during the parent teacher conference week. It happened either a lot before or a lot after, depending on how you see the situation. And I remember in that meeting, my teachers were telling my mother how slow I was, how I was, falling behind on so many of the academic standards in comparison to my peers. And I just remember that being a really big defining moment for me
Mm,
that set out um, the mental trajectory of a limiting belief of mine, which is
mm,
that I was inferior to my peers. And so that is something that I have spent so many years in therapy for, so many years trying to prove that I'm not stupid. So I think that was one moment that I felt like, could really be one of my like defining moments, one of those inciting moments, an inciting incident that a film could start about me.
mm. Okay.
The second,
No, go on. I don't have a
the
question.
the second memory that I thought could start off my film is this moment when my mother came home one day. I was living with my mother and my grandparents at that time in a one-bedroom apartment.
Mm,
We weren't rich at all and had very little resources. My mother
mm,
was working multiple jobs to make ends
mm,
meet,
mm,
and I remember my mother came home one day. Actually, I don't really 100 I don't think this is actually my memory. This is a memory that my mother recounted to me. And so I still
mm,
remember it for some reason.
mm,
Probably because when she recalled it for me, like I imagined it, and then
mm,
I have not been able to get that out of my mind. So I don't think this is something that I remember, but it was something I'm pretty sure that my mother put in my brain.
mm,
And so she said that she came home one day and I was sitting with my grandfather, and on the dining room table there were a handful of red beans, and he would combine a random number of them and he would ask me how many there were. And every single time he would combine a random number of these red beans, I still would not give him the right number.
mm,
And so my mother was a little bit shocked, and my grandfather looked at my mother, and she realized that I was just like my mother. My mother didn't really enjoy school when she was younger. She was much more curious about, what the leaves in her yard had to say to her rather than, doing
mm,
what the teachers wanted for her to do in class. And so she was like, in this child's mind lies a completely different universe.
mm,
And so I think that also kind of is very relevant to my life because I've always felt so different from my peers. And like I never was seeing the same thing that my peers did, or that I never processed information like my peers did. I always had the weird or stupid question for my teachers.
mm.
So I feel like that could be a really good opening scene. And then I can't remember the third one, but it was something similar
To
related to,
that.
yeah.
Mm. I love them. I love the two. Um, I think both can be an opening scene combined together, like jumping.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Okay, let me explain how I see it. It'd be the opening. Your call. Your mom is called to the parent conference office, and then we go to you sitting with your grandfather, and then back to what the teacher said, and then we go to your grandfather asking you about the beans numbers, and then both, and then we would go both to your mother's look on her face in both when the teacher tell her the news and when when she sees what's happening with you and your grandfather, and you will be kind in all of these scenes. You know, you are there in every single one of them as a child. I feel okay. Why is your academic performance an opening scene in your life? Because this is academic performance, right? And I realize in many countries and cultures, in fact in all cultures so far, what you do in school feels like the end of the world to a child. And even a parent who's an adult who probably went through the same thing, and eventually as an adult now, I know that it's not the end of the world if someone can't count beans, right? Like I did well in math, but I'll tell you one thing, I memorized everything. You know
Mm.
how people understand math? I memorize math problems. That's how I get marks. And if you ask me now anything mathematical, I'll use a calculator. I don't care. I am at this point in my life where people ask me math question, I'm like, I'm stupid in math. Sorry, just tell me the answer. Okay. Because I'm not going to I don't want to pretend anymore, because at some point in my life I was just pretending I'm good at it, but the truth is I was just memorizing it, right? So, and you know what, I'm not failing in life, I'm okay, right? So what I just it never occurred to me, why would adults, after realizing how life works, would bring a child to the world and then, you know, put them into that pressure, like as a teacher. And you know, you and I have a thing. We go back to think about our teachers. um I work with autistic children, and a recent thing that happened is I had to talk to other kids about autism, and someone says autistic people miss cells in their brains, one of the kids. And I said, no, 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 they don't miss any cells. They have all the cells we have. They just work differently, right? And that make them normal people. I don't like the word normal, right? But whatever normal or able the society wants to tell us, we
Mm-hmm.
all are, just in
Right.
different forms, right?
Yeah.
So why after all this, you're an amazing person and you have such a intellectual mind, in my opinion, and the way you connect dots in stories, and like, your visual stories are like, you know, why would academic performance be your opening scene?
Mm. So, um, so something that maybe uh, I'll share here because we talked about it extensively on in our last conversation. So I'm going through this midlife awakening
Mm,
where I'm realizing that I've known for quite a bit of time that I'm a neurodivergent person,
mm,
but I didn't know exactly how I was neurodivergent. And so, really, over the past 6 months, I've just been like analyzing all the different types of neurodivergence and going through every single label that is affiliated with neurodivergence and just really doing a deep dive with each one, right?
mm,
And I have been very interested in autism because I am pretty sure, not 100% sure, um, but pretty sure
mm,
that I'm high functioning autistic.
you're on the
And
spectrum.
I'm sorry.
You are on the spectrum,
Yes,
you're saying,
exactly.
yeah. Mm,
I am pretty sure I am somewhere on the spectrum.
mm,
Uh, but I think the way that we understand autism now is not comprehensive enough. And also, a lot of the research has been done on dominant cultures. And I am not male. I am not
mm,
white. I am
mm,
not, I am not so many things that, research has historically been done.
mm.
regarding neurodivergence. And so it's almost like, why am I going to spend my own money and my own time getting a diagnosis or an assessment
Based on
based
things
on, right, based on things that,
probably
has
does not
not
apply to you.
exactly, and does not consider any of the intersectionalities where I fall.
Mm.
And this is kind of a digression, but for a long time, I just thought there was something wrong with me, like specifically me. And that
Mm.
was the reason I couldn't get along in society. That's why I'm a highly sensitive person. I really struggle when I'm overstimulated.
Mm.
I'm sensitive to lights. I'm sensitive to sound and everything. Scent. I can smell,
Disgusting.
yeah, like things a mile away.
Yeah.
And so, I just always thought, okay, there's something wrong with me. But then when I kind of um, delved into my research on neurodivergence, I've been realizing, oh, actually, there's a community of people who are like me.
Mm.
There are people who think like me. There are people who speak like me. There are people who experience the world like I do. There are people
Mhm.
who are really sensitive like I am. And it has been so liberating to know that it's not just me, that, yes, society has made me feel, and I have felt in relation to society, that there was something wrong with me, and that,
Mm.
I didn't, but I'm realizing that it's just that I did not have the resources, the appropriate accommodations to help me succeed, when I could have, if
Mm.
someone had known that I struggled with anxiety, that I struggled with OCD, that I struggled with overstimulation. Like if someone had just known that I experienced the world differently than my peers, that maybe I could have been successful too.
Mm.
And so I feel like, the opening of my film would start with, oh, here is this girl that everybody thinks and is saying is academically incompetent, is intellectually inferior, because there is something wrong with her. But I think throughout the course of the film, I think we would realize that no, it's when there's nothing wrong with her. It's just that she is built differently, and
Mm.
given the right environment, given the right accommodations, given the right resources and knowledge about how her brain works, that she can actually do what other people can do, and just as well, if not better, in certain
Mm.
areas. And so I feel like starting with academic performance would, I think, be like the start, and then ending with, actually, can we really evaluate what it means to assess and measure the success of our students?
Mm.
Maybe we are
That's
evaluating
what's
our
wrong.
children incorrectly from the start.
Mm. Okay. So I had a question, but I think you kind of sort answer it when you say, "Oh, be successful." I would be successful. I was thinking, are you talking success in life or academically? Because I wasn't sure, but I think you were meaning in academics, right?
So, this is a really tough question, because I think, okay, so if we look at a strainer, right, like a
Mm.
sieve,
Mm.
and we kind of like, let's say, we're making, I can't think of a metaphor that doesn't require extensive context building, uh, but let's just look at a strainer, right? And we're looking for rocks that will stay in the strainer once we pick them up, right?
Mm.
And let's say the strainer is has a certain sized hole. So all of the really small ones fall through and all of the big ones stay in the strainer. And I feel like what school does is they stick a strainer in, and anything that doesn't stay in the strainer like falls through the cracks.
So
And
failure.
and so what I think I'm saying is school only measures scholastic performance, but that's kind of the strainer that decides the trajectory of your life. And so in I although I wasn't born and raised in South Korea, I know specifically that if you don't academically succeed here, you don't get into the top schools, and you don't go to the top universities, that you basically have a very difficult life.
Yeah.
It's a very competitive society. And I think the United States is a lot less competitive in comparison to, South Korea at least.
Mm.
But I do think that academic performance kind of is a defining feature of your life, and you have a stamp, you're branded in school, and it's really difficult to come out of a branded state once you leave school. And so I do agree that academic performance is just one type of success, but I think in school there isn't another type of success that is measured.
Mm. Interesting perspective. um, I have always thought I I grew up in so many places, as you know, not one, and in every place I have a different academic performance. It was always in the top 10 or top whatever, but it was always different because it always follows the environment and the requirements, and then where you start school actually roots you, have a like, kind of like prepares you for what to come, right?
Exactly.
And when you start in a place and then you go to somewhere different, it's hard to take those roots out and implement new ones. So
Exactly.
you kind of carry them and then you add and add and add. And it's not a pleasant experience, to be honest, but it's an interesting one. It's something, if you're resilient enough, I guess. Again, one of the words, I don't know how to replace it with a word that I like. uh, Not English, at least. You would, figure it out yourself. I was going to ask, where was that the parent teacher meeting was in the US, right? I'm assuming.
I'm sorry, what
the
what
the
was the
parent
question?
teacher the parent teacher
Yes, in
meeting.
the United
What
States.
in Okay, I just find, I because I live here in Canada, and I've always found those, I don't know, maybe it's a Canadian thing. They don't tell you. They have a sandwich method in telling you. I remember one of the
Oh yeah.
people I met. She told me I was rejected by a prof. I did not know I was rejected till a week later because of how
Oh.
nice she put it. And then I
Mm.
got angry because she could have told me, but you know, I don't necessarily think it's the best way to. I rather harsh truth in my life, but not everyone approaches that way. But I'm guessing this was like one of those moments where the teacher was actually straightforward, right?
So, this is okay. So, based on like, yes, right. So,
Yes.
yes. But I wanted to add something here because I might be also not painting the entire picture. So, I definitely think that so if we move on from the opening scene,
Mm,
there were subjects in school that I did excel in. But I don't think those were skills that were valued by society in a way that kind of redeemed you.
it's like they ask you, what are you going to do with this? It's not a major
Exactly.
that you're going to make money out of,
There you go.
right? What were the subjects? I'm interested in knowing.
So I always did pretty consistently well in English and art.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I have a thing for emceeing and hosting, and I've always been
Nice.
chosen to do that in my school. And I remember when I was in medical school, we did a project. It was for public health, and it was a public health course. And we went into schools and kindergarten to see what is the environment there, was whether it's healthy or not, etc. So one of the things that I came up with, because I am like I like this, right? You already know. So I interviewed the kids, right? I'll be like, what do you had for breakfast today? And they were like little cute. I love kids so much. And I was like, what do you, and they were giving me like cute answers, and I would laugh with them. And, one of the kids I still remember, she said, I buy my lunch. And I said, oh, do you like to buy your lunch? She said, no, just my parents are asleep by the time I leave. And I just never forget. I just
Oh.
started laughing. I was like, oh my God. Thank God it's not going anywhere. Her parents won't see this. But it was such a cute, straightforward answer, like, and I was like, and then we took this and it was a huge presentation. It was like a 40% of
Mm.
our mark, and we were like a couple, like, like a huge group too. And during my part, I first of all, I like put the interview on, and then I had my comments later. And the prof said, we do have a doctor now, but we lost an amazing, great host in TV. And that's what he said. He was like, okay, Dr. Sabreen, that we do have you as a doctor, but we did lost a great host and a great. And you have no idea, when he said that, I was so happy. And I told my father, and my father had this look in his eyes, like, no, you're not going there. He was like, what is he talking about? You know? And this is what I realized. I guess the effect of what is it, effect or effect? Effect, right? On what the people around you want you to do
Exactly.
has on you.
Yeah.
Because some people have many potentials, not just one. They can excel on so many things, like you, right? And instead of like, I think what is something the school system should be focusing on is not building skills from nowhere. It's finding what you have
Yeah.
and build on it,
Yes.
right? And yes, there are necessary skills like counting that everyone needs. Okay. But if I can count in one language and I understand the idea of counting and adding numbers, and there's someone else who can do accounting, right? And who can do like mathematical stuff that's way better than me in it, I don't have to be pushed to do calculus in school, because calculus gave me headaches. And I memorized everything, and I have no idea how it works now. And the time and waste and effort, and not just the time wasted and effort to do it, is the feelings associated with it, the feeling of stupidity, the feeling that, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why is everyone understanding this and me, I'm struggling with it? And everyone expects put you in that image that you
Yeah.
have to reach, right? But I think a better, more effective way, and I think it will be even easier for resources and money financially for schools, is to focus on what the children have and build on that. That way, we'll have people excel in different things in life, and we won't have doctors who are forced to be doctors, or engineers who are forced to be engineers, or whatsoever. We'd have people that just love what they do, at least. And even if they don't love what they do, they're good at it, and somehow they're going to find a way to love it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a better option to look. I wouldn't say it's accommodation per se. It's more of changing a perspective of something. I like changing perspectives more than the word accommodation,
Mm.
because accommodation suggests that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with people.
Yeah.
I think
I agree.
when we say people like mental health disorders and diseases, and you know,
Yes.
yeah,
It's
some
very
of them are disorders and
pathologizing.
diseases, but we're just stigmatizing things.
Exactly.
because we were told that things has to be like, you know what I saw it somewhere. I tell my friends that some traditions are just peer pressure from dead people. Why are we following
Mm,
it?
mm-hmm.
And some things, just like what you said, some studies are considered golden studies, but they're old.
Yeah.
Why can't we question them? Why can't we add more variety to the study sample? To the, you know what I mean? Just like what you said, like I wouldn't go and seek a therapist who's not, who doesn't, who's far away from my social environment, right? I wouldn't, like, for example, I remember one day walking into the it was it was the department for my college, and I was struggling with something, and I said, oh, I'm struggling with this and that. And the person who was just a administrator said to me, you know, you don't have to be in university. But I didn't say I didn't want to be in university, because in her mind, and it's something that I've realized here when I started college here, is there is some assumptions associated with the way I look, and I'm getting into there because I have a question here, um, that people would just put you there, and because I looked a certain way with hijab, with an accent and everything, and I did my studies in Ottawa, the capital, people just assume two things: I'm married with kids, which not true. And the second thing is, if I'm not married with kids, I'm like pushed to excel in I don't have it in me to excel, but I am pushed to excel in university and have a higher degree. It's not my ambition, and it was my ambition, and it's one of my ambitions, you know. So, and they based on that, and that's what she said, if you're struggling in first year in, like, it was chemistry, and it was, I was not struggling because I don't understand chemistry. I was sick, right? I was in the hospital most times, so I had to drop one subject for the sake of my
Yeah.
health. But she didn't even give me the opportunity to explain. She just assumed, based on, probably it, there's someone who looks like me who's going through this, I'm not gonna lie, or not assume, say no, no, it's not happening, it is happening. But, you know, let people tell you what they're going through before you give them solutions,
And
right?
then believe them. Yeah.
And then believe them. Like in your case, yes, you were a child. How old were you? Second grade, right? Yes,
Yeah.
you were a child, but what if the teacher asked you, you know, what if she asked you what you're struggling with? You know, what about your perspective? Even if you were a child, I find children perspectives are honest and real, and usually tells you what's in their mind, you know.
Yeah.
Let's go back to like uh something here. When you started, you said I rejected my South Korean heritage,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want to know why, in an
Mm.
honest way.
In an honest
Because,
way.
in
Mm-hmm.
an honest way, like in a real way, because you and I both come from, I would say, a minority, and living in a, and live right now I'm living in a society where I am a
Right.
minority, and there were times where I was the dominant person,
Yeah.
like you right now in your place, right? If I come to you, South Korea, I would be a minority, right? But you would
Yeah.
be the dominant person. And I believe that you went through both, being the dominant and the minority. So I want to know why. Like, you know,
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of a 2-minute answer rather than a 20-hour answer. And
I
so,
give you 10, 15 minutes answer. It's okay. I'll listen. I love
yeah,
it. Yeah.
I think I just want to give you a couple of like,
Scenes.
yeah, a couple
Mm,
of like appetizers, and then you let me know which one of those you want me to talk about more.
okay.
Um, so I was very, so I think I have to talk about, it wasn't internal. I think it was definitely external. So one thing was I noticed that Koreatown. So we didn't actually live in Koreatown, but I was ashamed of Koreatown because Koreatown in the city where I grew up was not an affluent neighborhood,
Mm.
and it was kind of closer to like the parts of the city that were considered potentially dangerous or um, you know just not the most affluent neighborhoods.
Mm.
And so that was one of the big reasons, is that I knew that Koreatown was not seen as a safe place, a desirable place. And so that was one thing. Another thing was I noticed that none of the Korean people were popular or or actually, I'm not sure if the popularity had anything to do with it, but I know that we were definitely a minority. And
Mm.
also, there were no famous people who were Korean. And so there wasn't a lot of representation in the media. And also, I think Korean food was also considered stinky, potent,
Mm.
not desirable lunch, right?
Mm.
And so all of these things combined kind of gave me the message that Korean culture is not acceptable in the United States. Korean culture is not a desirable, uh, is just not a desirable thing to be affiliated with. And so I was like, well, I can definitely try and pretend to be the dominant culture, like
Mm.
I didn't particularly do this, but I did know people who did. And so, like, even like beauty standards, right? So I have monolids, which means I don't have a double eyelid like most Western people, or I guess only East Asians. Not just East Asians, but there are certain cultures who don't have the monolid. But,
Mm.
Western standard of beauty is like, you're pale, you have like blonde hair, you have double eyelids, you're skinny, you're tall. Um, like there are all these things, and I
Standards.
didn't conform to those things at all. And so I think there was one popular thing that a lot of Korean people would do. And they would either get double eyelid surgeries, or what they would do is get, they would put tape on their eyes so
Oh,
that
I've seen the
they
tape.
could, right? So that they could mimic that double
Mm.
eyelid feature.
Mm.
And so I was just trying to mold somehow. I was like changing my body and the way that I appear so that I can be seen as someone who has value or someone who is acceptable in society. And so I think, that was generally the reason why I rejected my South Korean culture, heritage, those
Mm.
kinds of things.
Interesting. I Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. You visit South Korea like after high school or college? Like, how old were you when you decided to embrace it, kind of feeling?
Yeah, it was definitely after college. So I moved here in, yeah, when I was 22, I think.
And you made the change because deep down you felt like I need to connect with this, or something major happened.
Mm. So in college, I was an art major,
Mm.
and so many projects, right? A lot of the classes that I was taking, they the assignments were talking about like your heritage, your family, where you come from, your culture, your memories. And so, like, the last 2 years of college, I was really exploring my family, my memories from childhood. And
Mm.
my mother is a songwriter, and she's kind of considered like the mother of Korean folk music.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, I remember I had remembered things from my childhood that like my mother sang, and I also remembered things about my grandfather, like he invented the fire engine in South Korea. And so, like, I was remembering things about my family, and like my aunt was a really popular South Korean actress. And so I started like missing because I went to school like not in the same city as where I grew up. And
Mm.
so I was like kind of missing my family, and I was kind of trying to be close to them by remembering my history and remembering them. And so a lot of my projects actually explored that Korean culture. And also simultaneously, I had kind of decided that I wanted to become a Buddhist nun after I graduated college because I was really into Buddhism. I was studying Buddhism pretty deeply,
Mm.
and well, not just Buddhism, but just East Asian religion um, more broadly. And so I was very much like, oh my gosh, why have I rejected my Eastern roots? And so I think that was another reason that I was like, I want to explore my culture. I feel like I don't really have an understanding of my culture.
Mm. You feel like you did it wrong, the culture. Yeah. I This is a like interesting. I think I've seen, I don't know whether it's real people I've encountered or in movies do when these things happen. And I think it's sad what I just had a I and I wish, and I'll send you the link. When I had a podcast yesterday about someone who travels, and you know what we said is just one earth. A passport should be an identity document, not a segregation document
Mm-hmm.
that put people into places. Okay, let me give you an analogy that I discovered a few days ago, like in my last trips to my job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I arrive earlier than expected to where I go, because if I didn't arrive earlier, I would be very late. So it's either or, right? So and eventually I decided I'll be inside the mall because it's safer, because I'm there too early in the morning. So, and I'm like, since I can't sit still. Everyone who's watching the podcast will see me doing this. I can't sit still. And I decided, okay, I'll just walk in the mall since nothing is there. So, and it's something I've known all the time. uh the mall in Toronto, it's called Eaton Center, and when you go downstairs, you'd find cheap places. As you go up, it's the high brand. And because the mall was not crowded, and I would like, and they have like an hour to walk, right? And it's not crowding, it's just me and a few people walking or doing their thing or passing by the mall to go to their destination because it's too hot to walk out in the streets. So I would be going and taking the escalator up and then upper, and then I would go through the whole floors. And I realized as I go up, it's just upgrading. And it's upgrading and upgrading and
Mm-hmm.
upgrading. And I'm like, wow. And I know that when I shop, I don't shop downstairs, but I shop in the middle. And I go up for one brand because that the brand I can afford, right? because I'm middle class, sort of. Um, and I just started noticing more brands, the brands I know and the brands that I've never considered looking at because they're very, I don't even know the prices range. I just don't go there. As simple as that. And I was like, wow, it's like the platform. There's a movie on Netflix, right? And it's like life, you know? We put countries and people coming from countries in that level of floors, flooring in the mall. And we did, the society and community and system has organized this so well to the point it's everywhere. It's in the mall, it's branding, it's the way we eat. Just like what you said, South Korean food considered stinky and smelly and blah blah. And then out of nowhere it became authentic. What changed? You know? And you just go on and on noticing everything in life going through that. And then I don't know how it works. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but something that was once down it goes up, and something that was up it goes down, and it just, you just continue in this circle, which is an endless and empty and has no goal circle in life. And people need to be more conscious into this, because instead of embracing all of this together, we're just rejecting it, rejecting the variety and beautiful things that we are different in. And this is one of the things that I love most in life. We're so different yet so similar. Like me watching, I don't know if I told, that's another podcast. I was watching a drama in which a the girl was paying for the mortgage payments, but her brother decided to get married and he took over the house because her father paid the down payment. But she was the one working and paying all the bills for that house up to date. But now she has to evacuate and have no house because, her brother got married first and he's the man and blah blah, even though he's a good guy at heart, but he's not responsible, right? So in my head, sh- he should go and figure it out, him and his wife, because they made the decision and blah blah, but instead they took over the house, and she's in the street after all the effort and work, right? And that's just a social thing that, if you look at it, it happens everywhere. It's not South
Where did
Korea.
this happen?
That was a drama, a South Korean
Oh.
drama I watched. So, and I'm like, okay. And when I was watching this, I felt like I was watching a drama from my own country, right? And every time I watch something, I find something so different yet so similar.
Hmm.
Whether it's Canadian with French, Korean, Turkish, African, Arab, Middle Eastern. We share so many things between us. And if we just open our mind and our heart to realize there's someone like you with so much talent, and growing up in a society, an American society, you should have been embraced more. If you were in my class, I would be asking you, since you're a child, about your culture and things, so I can know more for myself as a teacher, and you know more because you're not living in your environment, right? And I've seen this happening to people who, Sudanese people who lived when I went left when I was in Dubai. I would say a word, because we all speak Arabic, right? And I would say a word, and my Sudanese friend is like, "Don't say this word here." They would laugh at you, even though it's the same language but different way of saying words. And I'm like, but this is how I say it, and that's okay.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I was thinking like, I think there are other things that happen too, because I definitely don't think that, like, my teachers, I mean, the dominant culture didn't exactly say that there was something wrong with me. Like, I didn't really have like racist teachers. I mean, there might have been one, or two, but they weren't outright racist. And, my peers weren't either. But I think it was, like the accumulation of like these microaggressions, like if somebody were just like, ooh, or, it just kind of built up. And I think it kind of became one of those like belief bubbles,
Mm.
that I was caught in. And so as you were talking about that analogy, which is beautiful, by the way, of you like shopping and realizing that all the expensive brands are at the top and all of the more affordable brands are at the bottom. That's a very great analogy for the hierarchy or, the caste systems that we've sort
Mm.
of either directly or indirectly or visibly or invisibly built in,
Mm.
different cultures. And, as you were talking, that reminded me of the film Parasite. It's a South
Mm.
Korean film. And I was very fortunate to be at the Busan Film Festival to catch that during the year it came out. And at the screening that I went to, the director, Bong Joon-ho, actually Skyped in at the end of the film and answered questions from the audience.
Mm.
And it felt so surreal because he was at the top, like the screen. And then we had the actors right underneath the director, just by location of how the theater was built. And then underneath the actors who were speaking were the audience members. And so I saw that hierarchy too, right?
Mm.
There's this director at the top, and then there's the actors who, he directed, and then we had the rest of society sort of watching this film. And I see it everywhere, just
Mm.
like these hierarchies that we build saying, oh, these people are above the line, these people are below the line, or
Mm.
here's the upper class, here's the lower class.
Mm.
You're right. It follows us culture to culture, city to city, people to people. It follows us. And I know you said like you don't believe in conspiracy theories, but I think societies are built this way for a reason.
Mm.
Power allocation is very integral to the running of the economy, not just to specific to a country, but to the world, right? And I
Yes.
think there are people at the top who want to keep that power structure in place.
But it's
So,
not hidden.
right, no, it's not
It's
hidden.
not it's not hidden. And you know what's crazy? We know it and we allow it and accept it. And
Exactly.
we
And we follow
participate
it.
in it. We participate willingly, you
Yep.
know? And not just that. We're taught. And I remember, and this is something I am sort of having a shame code with me, is when I was a kid, my aunt would say things like, "Oh, this girl, her father is a driver. Your father is a doctor. You're better." Does that make sense? And she would
Hmm.
say, because of who you are, you would go out and meet people, and the person you would marry won't be a driver, for example. Right? And those are the things that they were implanted because in my brain, because they were implanted in her brain, and it's just how it works. And dare you question that or go against that current? You would be the
Hmm.
crazy one. You would be the
Yep.
complicated, because those are things that I
The
was
black
told.
sheep.
Not just the black sheep. You're crazy, and you
Hmm.
are like you are seen as a threat.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like one time
I
I said to
do.
my friend, I just don't think having a child before 30 is a good idea. And she's like, no, after 30, And she started talking about how we kind of lose, as a woman, the ability to have children. And I'm like, did your mom lose it? Did your grandmother lose it? Like, yes, there are people who would, and that's like a sensitive, like a very complicated and sensitive topic that we could talk about for hours too. But like, why am I forced out of fear to have a child that I'm not ready for? Just because I'm scared I won't have child at a certain age. If that doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen, and it wasn't meant to be. But I rather that over not being ready to have the child with someone that I'm not ready to marry, right?
100%.
And that's something, that idea, I can I just kept it to myself, because one time I said it, and I was, and you know what? People, who know you would attack you from your weakest point. They would say, "Oh, is it because your parents are divorced? You have a complex?" And I'm like, "That's not, that's not the reason." It could be. There's something there. I have to agree. Divorce, as a child of divorce, is not easy. That's why I see the truth. I was put into this reality at a younger age, and I am
Yeah,
like the results, and that's why I see
same.
some truth there, right? um but why do you think we follow this? Why do we do that? And sometimes we join it, sometimes we try to reject it, and when we try to reject it, like me saying an idea, someone would say something that would like kind of like hurt me, and I'll be like, whatever, I'm not gonna fight this, I'm just gonna keep it to myself. In my case, I just followed what I think it is without necessarily talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, so as you when you ask the question why do we do this? I want to say that anytime we are going against a current, we have to expend so much more energy than if we were just to go with the flow.
Mm.
And I
Physics.
think, yeah, exactly. And also, I think if I were to apply that to like thought,
Mm.
right? It takes so much more brain power to actually think critically for yourself. And that is why when you, and I think that is why rebellion is the biggest threat to the social
System.
order, right? Because you're daring to say, well, even before rebellion, just even questioning why the status quo exists, right?
Mm.
Why are we blindly following the status quo? Why are we blindly allowing these dominant cultures or dominant ideologies or dominant whatever to keep going? And it's because it's easier for everybody in many ways to just follow an expectation, follow something that exists. And that's why, when people start to question, or when they start to rebel, or when they start to have different ideas, or they start to act upon those different ideas, it can really disrupt the social order. And every time that happens, you know it it's it threatens the power structure, the the fabric of the powers that exist. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question,
You
but
did. You did
yeah.
answer. The simple, it's always a simple answer. It's easier to follow than to
Yeah, it's easier
create
to
any.
follow.
And it reminded me of Animal Farm by George Orwell, when the
Oh
animals
gosh.
rebelled, and then eventually they followed the old system, the stronger ones, right? And I did read it long time ago. I didn't re. I have to reread because I read a lot,
Yeah, I was
but
like, I kind
yeah,
of, I'm
remember.
blending that with like 1984. I'm also
You know.
blending that with, yeah.
So but eventually I think, the people who the animals who were left from the rebellion, the rebellion, when I think the pigs took over, and then the donkey, I think it was the donkey or goat, who said, I can't remember the old
I don't remember
saying.
any of
No,
this.
I remember them saying, four is better than two, or two is four, or fours are equal, and then fours who stand at two then became better than, because four was people, four were the animals because they walk on four, and two is the people, human, because they walk on two
Walk on
legs.
twos.
Yeah, so the pigs eventually were able to lift and walk on two, right? And I think, oh, I hope I'm not remembering this wrong for the podcasting, but eventually the rebellion followed the um, the old system after getting rid of the spiritual, or the person who had the actual fire in them, because that person throughout history does not win. Eventually they became a traitor, right? And I think people see that, and I think people are smart. They see that and they say, oh, I don't want to be the traitor, I don't want to be the person who loses all at the end. I rather, maybe I would be rebellious and then eventually take over and join the top instead of like losing eventually. And that's usually what happens on like a higher level, but in like a family level, you would just be like the odd one,
Yeah.
crazy, the crazy rich aunt who comes to give her nephews and things because she refused to get married. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so that
Yeah,
reminds me of Little Women. Yeah, Miss Aunt March.
yeah, yeah. Let's go back to your this our conversation are always, I love it. We're going
I
back
know.
to your film, which is, all of this is related, by the way, because this would be the underlying theme to the plot, right? Because you see this child who is told that her academic performance is not as good as her peers, she's behind, some sort stupid, but they say this stupid but in a nice way. Right? And
Mm-hmm.
then we go from the conference to your meeting with to your mom coming into you and your grandfather. And then I am just imagining you just in school after that meeting, trying to catch up all the time and doing extra classes at the end of the school day. And just, it's you as a child and a student, this is the only goal in your life, to catch up others because you are behind. And the thing that people don't realize is they're never behind because there's no race. You're never behind, right? But you, as a child, you were told you are behind, and you just continue doing that through your life. What would you say the characters available with you in your film, you, your grandfather, and your grandparents, and of course a couple of teachers who are going to influence your life, and your mother? Who else like is going with you to this journey from second grade to uh, ending of college, where you decide to go back to South Korea? Do you see anyone
Oh,
significant?
yeah, there are some significant members. So I had several bullies my entire academic career, and definitely was ostracized from communities. And so I think those characters would come into play as well. And then there were other characters as well, but I would say that you've got the main ones: my
Mm,
mother, my grandparents, my teachers, um, and then these bullies. I mean, I did have really good friends as well.
mm.
And yeah, lots of really good friends. But I think I'm trying to think. Like, I would. So right now I'm writing a story, or I'm rewriting a story, or what I'm doing is I'm combining three different stories, and so I don't even know what to call that. I'm compositing a story, I guess.
Okay.
Um, and so I've been thinking, like, I need to know what the ending is to know which characters to keep and which
Mhm.
characters to, stash away for a different story. And so I
Mm.
think if we're talking about this particular film, if it just ends at college,
I'm not ending it
then
at college, but I'm just saying
okay.
to that period who was there.
Yeah. So I think we got the most,
the
the
most.
people. Yeah, and I mean there were significant like teachers, I think,
Mm.
who
And we would
influenced me
have
along the
them, would
way.
have them having moments in there encouraging you and trying to shift the
Yeah.
trajectory that you believe in, right?
Right.
Um, what were the bullies bullying you about? Was it your academic performance, your heritage, how you look like? Uncomfortable
Uh,
questions, I know.
no, it's not an uncomfortable question. It's just I finally made um I think it was either at the end of last year or at the start of this year that I finally made a breakthrough in therapy regarding that. And so, yeah, so if I'm just speaking from my perspective and not assuming I know what the other perspectives are, like,
Mm,
if I'm not trying to figure out why I was bullied or what the people who were bullying me was going through. Like if I just cut that part out and I
mm,
just focus on me, like why I think I was bullied. And it was probably because I was very different.
mm,
I was very passive. I didn't really speak up in classes. I didn't know how to articulate myself. I couldn't linearize my thoughts. I was I always ask the strange questions.
mm.
Um,
You're the perfect target.
exactly. I was the perfect target.
Yeah. And that's okay. I am serious. It's not,
Yeah.
first of all, this is your narrative. So if you want to like curse at them, I'll listen. Because it's called the lemon narrative. So it's your narrative. I think I'm not interviewing the bullies. I'm interviewing you. It's just again we go back to I just reminded me of a story where I attended a conference, a Muslim conference, mental health, where we're talking about men, and I was saying that men dominate societies. It's not like I wouldn't say all men, but you would say eighty
The
percent,
patriarchy.
the majority, right? And I said they actually do this and this, and society allows them. And the panelist, a very amazing woman, I still remember, she told me, she said, "Don't you think this is mother's job too, to raise this man in a certain way?" And with my understanding that day, I was thinking, oh, why do we have to blame women for everything, right? Why can't we just, accept that society allow them? And now today's Sabreen is, I think it's a combination, because the society tell the mom what to do with this man, and the woman, again going with the easy option, decided this is what for her son to grow up uh swimming with the current. This is how he's supposed to be raised. And that's also it goes with the bullies too, right? Because they see the easy target and they go for it because this is what everything around them tell them to do. And there are evil people who this is just their their nature, right? But if we were built a better environment, a better society, and better school system, we wouldn't have seen that. I don't think we
Yeah.
would. No, I think, and if we had better home environment that allow women and tell them it's okay to raise a child a certain way, and I see this in like my relationship with my brothers. One day I woke up, I was not feeling well. My brother came to greet me, to kiss me, and I didn't feel like kissing or greeting him. I was not feeling okay, and I was thinking I'll just let it go. But then I stopped myself. I said, if I allowed him to do that, even if it was a simple greeting, he will think he's always entitled to do that. And if someone else, another woman or any person in his life said no to him, that would, the other person would be at wrong, not him, because I broke that boundary, right? So
Yeah.
that day I said no, and he was upset, thinking I am at fault. But then I explained to him that no means no and everything else associated with it, and now he knows. He knows. And that was like a moment of clarity to me, that I have the power to change that. So when it comes to bullying, this is like my share of it. It's like, why can't we just raise people not to bully instead of like uh spending all this many resources to say no bullying? We'll start from the scratch, you know. I will go back to your movie or film. You went back to South Korea. What was how was it the first time you went? Like, you, how did you feel about it?
Oh my gosh, culture shock. It was such culture shock. And oh gosh, it's been such a long time now.
What is the
Um,
first culture shock you had? Or just one major? It doesn't have to be the first. Like a major thing that was like, wow.
I think a really big thing was how collectivistic the society was. So I remember one of the really tough things was I had a dietary preference of
Mm,
how I ate and how much I ate
mm,
and in what order I ate. Like, those
mm,
are things that were important to me. And so, and I didn't like Korean food. I didn't like garlic. I didn't like the smell of the dining hall. And so I would usually eat in my classroom. But I remember like my colleagues and, everybody who I was working with felt snubbed by me in many
mm,
ways because they were like, how dare she like eat by herself and not be part of like our society. And also they didn't like that I was getting special treatment because I was the foreigner and that I could get away with these things. Because even though some of the teachers wanted to eat by themselves, they're not allowed to do that. And so, why was I getting away with being able to do this? And
mm.
so, that was
You
a
came
really
at the
big
top.
culture shock for me.
You became at the
I'm sorry.
top. You were you were one of the minorities in the US. You came to the South Korean to become at the top. Do you realize that?
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
And I
that's
think that's,
everyone's experience who goes back home.
yeah. Well, I never really considered this place my home. And so I think like it was the home of my mother,
Mm,
and it was the home of my ancestors, but I never considered it my home. And it's only been like this time around that I do feel like South Korea feels more like home now
mm,
because I've spent almost just as many years here as I did in the States as an adult, right? If I subtract like my childhood, and just calculate based on the years that I've lived as an adult, when my executive functioning was at its,
mm,
matured state,
mm,
I've lived longer in South Korea than I had in the States as an adult. And so I do feel like this is a place that I can call my home now. And so I do recognize that there was a power shift, right? So I was at the bottom of the totem pole when I was living as a Korean American in the States. And then when I moved to South Korea, I was an English speaking person with
with
a
no
Korean
accent.
face. Mm-hmm. And
Mm,
so I definitely see that power shift, right? That I definitely gained the upper hand.
mm,
And I think that is why I feel comfortable here, is because I spent my childhood, my formative years being told or getting the message that I'm nothing,
mm,
but that now that I'm living here, that I actually have value to the society. Because when people meet me, they go, "Oh, you're so lucky that you speak English. You're so lucky you had been educated in the United States. You're so lucky that you have a US pass. Actually, that's not true. I think Korean passport is stronger than the US passport, but
Mm.
there are lots of messages here. And so that is but then again, I feel ashamed because I don't speak Korean very well.
I was gonna ask
And
about Korean in a bit. I was gonna say, do you
yeah.
speak Korean good? Um, Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh no, that was
That's
the
okay.
extent of that I was going to say.
You reminded me of a person, one of my friends who was born and raised in London, UK, and I've always wondered why would she come back
Mm,
when I was in middle school. And I remember one time, I don't know what we were talking about, but she said, "Oh no, I'd rather live in a Middle Eastern country because I'm more celebrated there than when
exactly.
I live there." And I said, "What?" And I remember her saying this, and it stuck with me for so long. And I was thinking, why do we need to be celebrated to be in a place, right? Because from the moment I left, because I was born somewhere and blah blah blah, and then but I went to schooling in Sudan, and then I left to Dubai, and over there, people laughed at my accent and like, how my hair, because I have like kind of Afro curly hair, right? Not the straight hair. My skin is, you know, darker. It's black. A lot of things, they laughed about a lot of things, and I honestly didn't care, and I don't know why. And I think I don't know what is it, but things that people tell me does not affect me. And maybe if you
Mm,
go back to the teaser where I talk about my teacher, maybe that
yeah.
was the trigger that freed me for what people tell me. Maybe it was, I don't know. I can't pinpoint it yet. And when I went back, that spent a year in Dubai, and then when I went back and was celebrated, and I was the smart one, the blah blah one. I was like, interesting. I was living a life of a status here, went, and that status was taken away because I became a minority. And the Sudanese are considered the blacks of the Middle East, and some people don't. Some people even don't call us Arab, but I think the ethnicity is Afro-Arab for us.
Mm,
And so we face a lot of things. Back in my day, nowadays things are shifting. So I was like, okay, I didn't care, and then come back, celebrate it, and I had this experience over and over and over, where I'm like celebrated one place, I go there, I'm nobody, then I come back, I'm like celebrated, and I think that's what, like, I don't understand. I just
yeah.
stay where I think right for the moment.
So I think that, sorry,
Go
uh,
ahead. Go ahead.
I think this is a very, very, very important question and conversation topic. And I used to think exactly like you, where it doesn't matter where I am. Why do I need a place to tell me that I'm special? Why do I need a place to feel like I'm part of the collective? Why do I need that? Right? And why do I need to feel privilege
Mm,
to live in a place and feel comfortable? And I think that I used to think, and I used to hate that part of myself that was like, I felt so ashamed that I felt so much more comfortable living in South Korea than I did in the United States.
mm,
And then I started realizing that not feeling deserving of power was actually taking a toll on my health, not just my mental health, but on my physical health. And there's a lot of research, and you went to med school, and so maybe you already know this, but I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Huberman, Andrew Huberman, at on his podcast Huberman Lab, and he was interviewing Dr. Sarah Gottfried,
okay.
and he was asking her, and so he's a professor of neuroscience at Stanford. And so he was talking to her about, and she was a trained physician at in a program that was run by MIT and Harvard. And so she was a trained gynecologist, and now she does a lot of she practices precision medicine
Mm.
and really works with a lot of females. She's written several books on like hormonal health, women's hormonal health. And Huberman asked her a question like, what do you think contributes to some of the disparities in the health between women and men, et cetera, et cetera? I'm kind of butchering everything. Uh, but she said something that I will never forget. And she said, patriarchy is one of those things that really continues to wreak havoc on women's bodies. And he was like, what? Like, can you like talk about that a little bit? Can you explain what that means? And she was talking essentially about this concept of power over, right? That we constantly, that society sort of subordinates women to a place where we say, oh, well, if you are feeling this way, you must be crazy. There must be something wrong with you.
Mm.
And even if we're just looking at like reproductive health, right? Like, why is it the woman's responsibility? Why is it only solely the woman's responsibility to make sure that she doesn't get pregnant? Like there was a really good argument made, like,
I know of it.
um, right? Like if women sleep with 50 men in 1 year, she can only have one baby. But if a man, right, sleeps with 50 different women, he could potentially
I
give
think it's,
birth, well, not right, to 50 different children.
yeah,
And so, why are we controlling the woman? Um,
but not the man.
why do the women have to take those hormone disrupting pills
Mm.
to prevent childbirth, right? That a more um, why is that the contraceptive that of choice when it's actually the men who are seeding all these women, right? And so after listening to that, I was just like, this whole concept of power, right, is not just this invisible thing in the air
Awesome.
where, right, it's not an invisible thing. It actually impacts our health, it impacts our mental health, it impacts policy, it impacts education, it impacts everything. And
It's
so
in purpose too.
exactly, and that's why it's really important to live in a place where you feel comfortable, where
Mm.
you're not oppressed, where you are not prone to stress. And like I'm sure, like I've done a lot of work and inner work that I feel like, okay, well, there's this whole like, people killing Asians in the United States right now that I'm not really sure I want to go back into. But
Mm.
like I've done a lot of the inner work to be like, okay, I can kind of get back to feeling comfortable again in my own skin. I feel safer. Done a lot of like somatic like healing. And so maybe when I live in the States again, maybe I won't be prone to this like powerlessness that a lot of people of minorities feel. Um, but I feel like I did need some time living in Korea to feel like actually I am worth having power. I do deserve to have this level of comfort, this mental comfort, the physical comfort, and to kind of regain my health before I go back into a place that says, oh, you're nothing, or oh, you suck. And it's great. It's now like that BTS is super popular, and Korean barbecue is super popular, and
Oh
Korean
gosh,
dramas are
yeah.
super popular. Like
They are
I do
Korean are the
feel
thing now.
maybe not the thing, but it's
They are.
definitely yeah, we've kind of elevated somewhere
Yeah.
somehow. And so I do kind of feel comfortable going back to a place, um, with that all having been changed a little bit. But so yeah, that was a really huge digression. I'm sorry.
I think you shifted something in my mindset too, but it's not the right time to talk about it. Um, I'm just going to do a timeline of you. I see a pattern here of you being told something and you put into, how would I say this? It's like you are putting, by the teachers and everyone, you're put it into a mold of a certain character, right? And then you trying to get out of that mold and like catching up with the other version, better versions, right? And going into college, and I think college, and this is one of the things that huge argument of education is not important, going to college is not important because you can get knowledge anywhere. But I think college is not just about the knowledge on courses, it's about the experience and
Status.
shifting
Oh yeah,
person's personality. Like it has a lot of things, it's not just education,
100%.
right? That's why it's important to go. It's a whole experience that, I just wish it's free because I don't
Mhm.
think there's any reason it shouldn't be free, but that's another topic. So I feel like there's
Another
so many,
2 hour talk.
another 2 hour topic. But I'm trying to catch up with your movie or film, and then you go there and realizing how important, realize discovering your culture, that, and I feel your culture was the shy character behind you that trying to be like, hey, hello, I'm here, and you're like, go away, right? And you
Yeah.
realizing, oh, this shy character is I want to see more, and you coming here and becoming shift in power, shift in importance. Also, something I always notice is like when I go back home, I'm pretty, right?
Mm.
Over here, I'm just another person, right? But over
Mm.
there, I'm one of the pretty ones, right?
Mm.
Even though, like, I don't even follow the standard beauty over there, but still, I look like I am with people who look like me, so I fit in the beauty standards that you were talking about earlier, was something I wanted to mention. And by the way, I think you're so beautiful. Like every time I look at you, I think you're so
Oh,
pretty.
oh, thank you.
I
But
had
I don't fit the beauty standard here at all. Like,
I know.
I'm,
I am
oh,
aware of the
at
beauty.
all.
I don't fit the beauty standards too, by the way. But
No, no, I mean in South
in
Korea.
South Korea, yeah, I don't fit the beauty standards in Sudan too.
Oh,
But you know, I am prettier over there. Not the beautiful one, but prettier.
prettier.
Let's just focus on that. Comparing over here, no, like I don't get the notices I get when I'm there, if that makes sense,
You're
right?
so funny.
So it's
You're
not just the
so
beautiful
funny.
one. No, no, no. Just prettier. I'll take that. Thank you very much. Not that I care, but I do care. I love myself how I look, by the way. But
Yeah, me too. But I
yeah,
definitely
don't
don't
fit.
think that I
I don't
fit the
fit any
standard. But it's
standards.
okay.
I just at this point, following the standards is ridiculous because it's not
Yeah.
achievable anymore. And I love food so much. To like, it's not achievable, and I gave up. So
Oh, my cheeks hurt.
you know what I used to do, because I have big cheeks, I used to do like this, you know, to like kind of like have lesser body weight, face weight in here, and I'm like, maybe I should get rid of my cheeks by the surgery. And then being in med school, I went and looked actually at the surgery in YouTube, and it was horrifying. I was like, there's no way surviving this surgery. I
Hmm.
don't have the money for it anyways. It was one of the dreams, but you know what? Unachievable. So it's okay. So you're going back to your movie. You go back. You fit in there with everything, and not, you just don't. And sometimes when you don't fit in your environment or your country, you become the odd one. It's a good thing.
Hmm.
Just like you, in your case, you're the person who does not, and it's the status to speak English and to have a kind of like not so good mother tongue. They're like, oh, because she's so bougie, she lived there, stuff like that, right? And then you go back to the US again. How did you feel going back?
Mm. So, I think all of these I ideas of like, or these concepts of feeling inferior or insecure, those were not things that I actually became aware of until after living in South Korea, maybe the second time around.
Mm,
Um, you know, I think that comparative lens only you only unlock these comparative lenses once you've lived somewhere else. And so, I some so a creative partner once told me that one of her teachers used to say, like, it was a sociology class, and
mm,
he would say this thing that I'll never forget. And he said, the fish don't see the water, right? And so, like, when you're living in a society, you don't understand what air you are living in. You don't understand the environment. Once you're taken out of that air and you are breathing a new air, you suddenly are able to compare the two airs.
mm,
And so, and also, I wasn't mature enough. I was still like 22, 23, 23 or 24 when I moved back to the States. And so, my prefrontal cortex was still not fully developed.
mm,
I mean, from, a physiological perspective or standpoint.
mm,
But, and like I told you, I wasn't one of the intellectual ones, and I wasn't really an analytical person,
mm,
at least not in the sense of being able to analyze, like in a very meta kind of way, a metacognitive way.
mm,
And that's not something that I developed until I became a better teacher, which was, like 6 years later. And so when I went back to the States, I just felt like, oh, reverse culture shock, right? Like, I started to see, oh, this is not a collectivistic society. There's a lot of more freedom here. I can actually articulate myself without having to kind of walk around. I mean, because I was raised in a Korean household, I was always very circular about the way that I spoke. But I
mm.
had to be even more circular when I was living in South Korea. But when I went back to the States, I went back to just being, like my natural circular way of speaking. So I don't think that really answers your question, but
It
those
does.
were some of the things that,
No, it does
yeah,
because I had similar experience. The first time I left Sudan, going to Dubai, and then going back, I was like, oh, what? It's like I thought everyone is different. I was a
mm,
child. I was like 14 or 13, and I thought, why is everyone different? Then I realized people were not different. They're still the same. I have a new perspective on things. I have seen things, and now I'm going back to what I used to be, but it's not like what I remember it to be because I don't have the same brain that was, and that was 1 year difference. So I can only imagine uh how, like, this is again a good topic for another conversation. I have like, I feel like
our
we are,
trees.
yeah, our trees. I feel like we're giving birth to ideas while we talk in one topic, it's such a
Yeah,
great
more
thing.
branches.
Yeah, we're branches like that. And then you went back to US and then coming back to South Korea. This is your last time, right? In which
Um, no, so it was second. This is my third time.
this is your third time going back and
Yeah.
forth. Yeah. And is there a specific reason of you changing your mind a couple of times? Or like,
Well, so it wasn't like a singular reason. I think there were multiple reasons that kind of converged. And I think they were all related to job opportunities or being closer to my then boy, well, my husband, my then boyfriend,
Mm.
and also like the cultural experiences, the um, yeah. So they were all kind of that, and then I think yeah. So they were all kind of, I guess, the central reasons were they were all related around job opportunities.
Mm. I want to ask a question that we might
Yeah.
take it later, but I'm interested in
Yes.
this for my own selfish reasons. Is that with your husband, did you end up with someone South Korean or someone not South Korean?
Oh, yeah.
Because of this
He
whole thing, I feel like this would play your whole film would play a part in this decision, not just being with someone or being in love or so ever. Somehow I think it would. So just answer my question if you want to.
I will give you a under 1 minute response. I'll try. So when I was younger, I never thought that I would be with someone Korean. And then through the course of my life, actually, I thought I was going to be a Buddhist nun, so I didn't think I would ever get married.
Mm,
But then when I met my husband, he's Korean American.
mm,
And I realized, oh, we have a lot in common. And it's really nice that we understand the culture and
mm,
we understand, have similar ideas of the social order. We have under like a similar understanding of what kinds of roles we want to play in our like relationship, and those were all kind of defined by like South Korean ideals, or not South Korean, but just Korean or just even East Asian or Asian
mm.
sort of things. Yeah. So, yes, short answer, he is Korean American.
So he's someone similar to you,
Mm-hmm.
lived a somehow similar experience. Because I too,
Slightly similar. Yeah.
well, there's some
Many
intersections.
overlaps.
Yeah, because I too never like no, I was when I was young. Didn't think about like me thinking about marriage was not ever a question until later, and but I currently I don't think I'll marry someone from my culture. But then there's the fear of a different culture collapsing and parents, and so I'll never know where this will take me. I'm not really worried, but it's just something that came up to my mind. Someone like, because I feel like we have relapses too. How did you end up, who did you end up with, and how it's going? I had like such a curious mind towards this, right? Which is very interesting. After speaking for almost 1 hour and a half, 40 minutes about your
Yeah.
life, the feature film, would you change your opening scene? Is it a hard question?
It's only a hard question because I don't know if what we covered would be the story that I would want to be about my life.
What would be a
Uh,
story you want to be? What would we can cover it now, but what do you think we didn't cover would be a story?
but I don't think I've done the things that I want to do with my life yet
Mm.
to end that story. So, we would have to do like a reprise like 20 years later
I
to
was
see to
I was going
revisit
to
this.
say this is not an end. We don't have an end for this
Yeah.
film. We're never
No, we
going to.
don't.
None of my guests will
Yeah.
have an end to their uh, film. But I do think this would be your film, even though you're not
Oh, you
seeing
do?
it. Because if you're thinking about you seeking understanding of why you're different,
Hmm.
right? Because I feel like this is what would you be thinking about, isn't it? Why you're
Yeah.
different, how the
Yeah. What
education
makes me
system
different?
uh, uh, like contributed to that, the teacher. And again, going back to your Homeroom podcast, right?
Yeah.
Which we will leave links below. Um, is I think all of everything you talked about has a contribution, a major contribution to who you are and why you're different. The
Mm.
living in the US, your grandparents and your mom, the stinky meals that someone like, one time did, too, right? They're not stinky. I didn't taste Korean food in a good place. It was in the mall, and I'm pretty sure that's not how it tastes. But I'm waiting for someone to recommend a good restaurant in Toronto. So if you know a good restaurant in Toronto, let me know. Um, so what else? The food, the culture you're trying to assimilate. Is it the word?
Mm.
To
Yeah. The
where you are,
assimilation,
yeah, to
acculturation.
where you are, and then finding out later in college your heritage and culture, who we say is like the shy character behind you coming to South Korea, the culture shock, you going back with a new, probably the second time with a new perspective. All of that contribute to why you're different. This is the main reason why you're different, right? Because of
Mm.
you being a fish taken out of water into a different environment, and then you going back to the water, and you going back to the different environment that you lived in, that you're familiar with, but it's not so familiar now, and you know why it's not so familiar, right? And then going back to the familiar water. And that's just, this is who this is why, in my opinion, and this has like a huge um impact on you, just like what you said about the doctor, who I forgot her name, I'm not saying
Dr.
that,
Sarah Gottfried. Yeah.
yes, say that all of this has contribution to your health, right? Do you
Yeah. The
think,
patriarchy.
and not just that, a person who's not born in their culture, ground, or environment, like I was born in Moscow and you were born in US, right? We were not born in the environment where our heritage or our culture comes from, and that has an
Yeah.
effect on us. We
Yes.
think, and we think it does not, but I can tell you, and I never wanted to be the different one,
Yeah.
but I'm always the different one. I'm always who challenges what's
Yeah.
happening, and I don't want to challenge it. For anyone listening, when someone challenges something, they don't want to. They don't want to be the odd one. They don't want to not take it easy. They want the easy route. There is no easy route over
Yeah.
there. It's not, it
Yeah.
doesn't
We just
exist in
want to be
our mind.
comfortable.
Yes, and that's, we want to be comfortable. That's why we challenge it, because we're not comfortable with whatever is comfortable to you, right?
100%.
So that's your story, and all of, I don't want to take your narrative away from you. It's just my narrative of what you told me so far. I see it. I see it like that. I see you going back and forth.
That's really helpful, actually. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just like have you been to Korean town after you came back from South Korea?
Yes. And I have to say, I don't like Koreatown for different reasons, but I definitely don't feel ashamed of it anymore.
Does Korean town looks like Korea? Is it the actual replica, or is it a westernized replica?
I mean, I can definitely tell that it's still, a
Has
US city with Korean signs. But I know that there are a lot of people, like workers in some cafes and some places, they don't speak English. So it does feel
migrants who found a
sometimes.
job in a place where they can speak their
Exactly.
language?
Exactly.
I'm familiar with that. I am familiar with that, and I am familiar with the shame
Mm.
associated with your country and your heritage. Not gonna say I felt it, but I felt pressure to feel it by my
Mm.
peers and by
I
everyone.
understand that.
It's like some people are like, I remember being in Dubai, some people are like, how dare you to ask for certain privilege because of who you are, right? And I don't, and I didn't care. I dare to, right? And that does not make me a better person or anything. It's just a characteristic that I have that I didn't know why I had, right?
That's
I
so beautiful the way that you said it.
is it
I love that. The idea that I do understand the shame. I never felt it, but I felt the pressure to feel it. That's a golden nugget right there.
thank you. And I think if you give it a thought, you were pressured to feel that shame too, and you
Absolutely.
took the easy route to feel it,
Yes, you're
right?
right. That absolutely was the easy route
It is,
because I succumbed to that pressure. I could not rebel.
and that's okay because we're not supposed to repel. We're supposed to be
Yeah,
born,
we're supposed to be comfortable.
yes, into comfort places, and and not everyone is privileged to
Yeah,
have that.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
I can talk forever about this, but I have a question to ask you, which is, what do you think the theme in your film? I want to know your narrative.
So I really like the one that you shared with me. And I don't think that that is what I would have said before we had this conversation. I would say that one of the themes would be like turning a weakness into a strength, like um, thinking that I was stupid this entire time and had no value to society, but actually realizing that what actually made me different has become now valuable to society.
Mm,
And so I think one of the themes would be societal worth, societal value. And I heard a really great term before that I hadn't heard before. Uh, I was listening to a podcast between Lewis Howes and Donald Miller. He wrote Blue Like Jazz.
mm,
And he differentiated this concept between um, a person being a person versus being an economic product. And I understand it, and I understand this term because there are other terms for this, but I'd never heard the juxtaposition of the word economic and product before as it applied to humans. And I was just so blown away because it's so true. Like, one of the reasons I started Homeroom, the podcast, was because I don't want our school systems to turn us into economic products. I want them to teach us how to be successful humans, not
mm,
economic products. And that's why it was so revolutionary to me when I heard this term.
mm.
Um, and now that I went off on this tangent, I forgot your question.
The theme.
Yes. So the theme I wanted to sort of play with was this idea of the theme being this question of how do we raise our children to be successful humans and not economic products?
Mm.
I think that would be the theme of my film.
And it is because you're being treated as an economic product when you were a child, and you seeking
Right.
that perfect picture of economic product, and then you realizing, oh, I shouldn't be an economic product. I shouldn't be seeking this. I should be doing this and this and that. And you coming to discoveries after discoveries from you going back and forth. And I love the theme. You know, one of the best themes I've heard. But my other question would be, what is the name of your film?
You didn't give me this one to prepare in advance.
I'm
I
full of
have a thing about
surprises.
titles. You
Yeah,
are.
I am full of surprises.
Um,
I can't give you everything. But think about
so
it.
I,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, I'm gonna have to think about it.
You have to.
But
Mhm.
I, I do think it has something to do with the word home.
Mm.
Um,
This is one
and
of my
I'm not
favorite
sure how.
words.
Me too.
Home is home is everything. Like home is everything.
Okay.
Even like when whenever like my mom says this guy is a good guy, blah blah blah, and I say no, and she says, "What's your problem?" I can't tell her that I'm looking for a home in a partner because no one would
Hmm.
understand that unless they
I
experience
understand
that.
what you're saying.
Yes, because this is what I'm looking for, and a home is a place where you are safe. You where you're
Yes.
not necessarily protected, when you know that you will be protected one day, and one day you can be the protector. A home where you're not judged, you can be yourself, your ugly self, your silly self, your stupid self, your beauty self. You can be any self you want and be comfortable with that. So that's really important. So
Yes. And you know what the secret is knowing how to turn any house into a home.
yeah.
And that takes a lot of inner work. But I think something tells me that you've done a lot of the inner work. So you'll be fine.
I hope so. I okay, I have a name. You just said it, from a house to a home.
Oh, I love that.
I won't put it as a name of the podcast until you think about it, and
Yeah.
you message me saying, "Okay, Sabrine, this is what I want it to be," because this is your narrative. I know I interrupt a lot because I'm a talkative person.
No.
Talk a lot,
Yeah.
but like
But it's great.
I had like I just you one of the people in my life that trigger ideas in my brain, and that's such a valuable person to have, right? because
Oh.
because sometimes you're with a person that they just block the creativity, the chaos, they just block it, and you're like I'm suffocating, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm with people like you who are just giving me ideas, and it's like a fire of ideas in my brain, poof, 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 poof. And this is one of the episodes that I have so many ideas that cannot fit. We're almost 2 hours now, and I don't want to
Oh
I
my
don't want
gosh.
I don't want it to end. But I know you have a daughter, you're a mom, and you are in Korea right now. And what time is it like almost 11 over there?
It's 11:23. So yeah, I
It's
should probably
11:20.
go.
You should probably go to
Yes.
sleep, right?
But
But
I really loved our conversation
I
as
love
always.
one of the best conversation I always have is with you. Last question: what is your
Oh.
takeaway from this on your life?
Oh, that is such, you can't drop that as a question and then, oh gosh, it's a really big question.
It's a big
And
question,
I,
but
yeah, it's a huge question.
you can have the first thought in your mind and just answer it. I love first thoughts; they're always raw and good.
So I think the, so I think I told you today I was compositing three different stories that I've been writing over the past 10 years.
Mm,
And I got stuck in one part of the outline, and it was, how do I end this story?
mm,
And I think having this conversation with you really helped me narrow down some of the avenues that I could have gone down. But
mm,
I think there are a couple of avenues that I think feel like have more gravity
mm,
because of this conversation that I had with you. And I really loved some of the questions that you, I mean, I loved all of the questions that you asked me, but some of the questions that you asked me really got me thinking about some of the things that I was writing about.
mm,
And I realized that I have stronger opinions about some of those that I was pondering And so I think the biggest takeaway is I kind of know what to do next with my outline. So thank you very much.
That's great. That's amazing. I don't know. I have so many to say as takeaways, but I think for me is that our journeys in life, all of us as human beings, might be different, and I always come to this conclusion, but they're similar. They always have these relapses in them, and it's so beautiful to experience it every time. You have such a rich experience. I don't know if you know that. It's very rich. And I know you're writing a book, or you already wrote a book. It's not published yet. But I'd
Three
love
books.
3 books. Wow.
I'm
Okay.
trying to stitch them into one now.
Okay. Yeah, you're one of those people who can take one aspect in their life and make a huge book about it. So I would read your books. I would listen to you forever, right? And I wish that in each step or era in your life since second grade to this moment, you are a person of value. I just want you to know that.
Thank you, Sabreen.
And
So are you.
thank you. And I would say, don't let anyone uh, identify your narrative. Narrate it yourself. Own it, right? And I wish one day to visit you where you are. I love the Korean culture. Thank you to the drama and to my friends' pressure. And then because of that, I met you. I met Sun. I have Koreans all around me right now. Might
Mm.
as well learn the language, which I'm doing. Okay. So thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here and for opening your heart to me and sharing a lot of things that were all genuine and authentic and taught me so much about life and sharing it with everyone else. Thank you so much.
Oh, and you are such a sweetheart. You have so much to give. You think critically. You are so generous with your time and your support, and you're such a wonderful human being. And I really hope you continue to become a part of everybody's lives. And thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
this
Oh,
conversation,
I'm into
the
that.
ones that we've had before, and the ones we will have in the future.
Exactly. I'm gonna have you in a year or two or something. If this could, I'm hoping this will continue to something, and maybe 20 years, and see where this
Yes.
story goes to. Because I don't think any story has an end. They're always continuous in my brain in the world. Even when the film says the end, I'll be thinking about what happened next. So I want to thank everyone for watching and listening to the Lemon Narrative with Sabreen podcast. And until I see you next time, bye.